Frodo was born in September 22nd, 2968 of the Third Age, as the only child of Drogo Baggins and Primula Brandybuck. This also happened to be the same birthday as his cousin Bilbo, who was born on the same date in 2890. Frodo's parents were very respectable hobbits, and they often visited his father-in-law, Gorboduc Brandybuck. This was the cause of their death by a boating accident one time when Frodo was 12. Frodo stayed in Brandy Hall in Buckland with his mom's relatives until Bilbo adopted him as his heir when Frodo was 21. Frodo was taken under the custody of his uncle, Rory Mac Brandybuck at first. Bilbo is Frodo's second cousin once removed, though the term uncle was sometimes used as a term of endearment. Frodo celebrates his 33rd birthday and coming of age along with Bilbo, who was turning 11. Like Bilbo, Frodo desires to see the mountains and was suspected to have met elves, which was sometimes deemed odd by the hobbits. He used to have birthday parties in Bilbo's honor until he turns 50. Much like Bilbo, Frodo also showed signs of good preservation due to the effects of the One Ring despite not using it much for the past 17 years. Gandalf found out the magic ring was in fact the One Ring of Sauron, where Frodo would eventually be tasked with the quest to destroy the One Ring. Frodo decides that he must head to Rivendell, and by then, Gandalf had specifically decided that Sam would be going with Frodo. Frodo was afraid that he would be chased by their dogs when the hobbits arrived at the farmer's house. This was because he was once caught stealing mushrooms as a child from Father Maggot, who eventually thrashed him, sending his 3 dogs to chase him to Buckleberry Fair. After arriving at Crick Hollow, Gildor has revealed the Black Riders and told Frodo to avoid them. Additionally, Frodo becomes an elf friend as Gildor notices his connection with the elves, having picked up the languages. Frodo later has a prophetic dream of a tower near the sea at the Grey Havens, where he will eventually go after his journey to Mordor. After this, the hobbits go over to the house of Tom Bombadil, and Frodo has a vision of the Blessed Realm. There, Frodo also seems set apart in that he has a mental bridge between mortal and immortal worlds. However, that doesn't change his mortality. He is still physically a hobbit and immortal. Furthermore, during the Council of Elrond, Elrond compared him to the other elf friends, Hador, Húrin, Turin, and Beren. Frodo arrives at Rivendell after the Witch King of Angmar wounded him at the top of the winds, which turned him into a wraith, like the Nazgul, and will leave him with many scars long after his journey. By then, Elrond had called on Glorfindel to guide Frodo to Rivendell so he could heal him. Glorfindel lured the Ringwraiths into the Brunnen River, while Elrond released a great flood, while Gandalf gave the waves the form of horses. This flood destroyed the Nine and killed their horses, sending their wraiths back to Mordor, which allowed the Fellowship more time to plan. After Frodo finds himself in Rivendell, he meets Bilbo again and receives a sword sting from him. This led to the eventual destruction of the One Ring, where he would be going with the Fellowship on December 25th, 3018 of the Third Age, or what we know as Christmas morning. Furthermore, they were stopped by heavy snow in the mines of Moria and went to Lothlorien mostly unharmed, where they learned of the death of Gandalf the Grey. Galadriel reveals her ring to Frodo, and the Fellowship had gifts from her. As a result, she gave Frodo a vial from the Silmaril of Arendelle. Frodo tried to go off to Mordor alone at the Falls of Rhoros, but Sam will not let him. "But I'm going to Mordor," he says, in which Sam replies, "I know that well enough, Mr. Frodo. Of course you are, and I'm coming with you." Thus, Frodo and Sam go on their way to Mordor, while the others are on their way to Minas Tirith. In the beginning, Frodo, out of understanding, was able to show compassion to Gollum, having the weight of the One Ring on him, while Sam had trouble understanding, which was evident by his initial remarks. Shortly after, Frodo was caught by Shelob, which made Sam carry the One Ring for a short time. This made Sam a ring bearer, and he would one day meet Frodo at the Undying Lands as well. After just a short time, he experienced visions of grandeur and temptation, much like the other characters, such as Boromir and Bilbo, who had come close to the ring, but Frodo did not. However, the ring was weighing on Frodo more, and Sam decides He couldn't carry the ring, so he carried Frodo instead up the slopes of Mount Doom. Morning of March 25th, 3019 of the Third Age, Frodo was well set to drop the One Ring into the fire. However, he succumbed under the ring's influence at the last moment, claiming it as his own. He was attacked by Gollum, who bit off his finger when reaching over to get the ring back. Eventually, Gollum fell into the fire with the One Ring. Thus, the One Ring was thrown into the fires of Mount Doom, which was Iluvatar and his divine intervention after all. By then, Frodo was simply incapable of making this conscious decision to destroy the ring, and it was not a moral failure, especially after long possession, months of increasing torment, and when starved and exhausted. Frodo did all that he could do at this point, and few would be able and willing to go as far as he did. They would later be taken to Ithilien by Gwaihir, Landroval, and Mordor, and rest there for a month, where they were crowned for the One Ring's destruction in the field of Cormallin. Then they would go to the wedding of Aragorn and Arwen. Arwen would then give Frodo her place in the Undying Lands as a gift in order to heal him, for she was the first to see the signs. He seemed guiltless at first, but one could sense the disquiet growing in him. He had given his life in sacrifice and expected to die very soon, but he did not, and one can observe this sense of disquiet. Though I may come to the Shire, it will not seem the same, for I shall not be the same. This was also evident by his refusal to fight against Saruman later in the Battle of Bywater in the Shire, and many other wounds caused by carrying the One Ring for so long. On top of that, every March 13th and October 6th, Frodo would fall ill. Lobelia sold Baggin back to Frodo after the loss of her son, and Frodo would then pass along the Red Book and Baggin to Sam, who would write the last pages and edits and raise the family with his wife Rosie. Frodo finally decides to join Bilbo in the Undying Lands after the last of his illnesses in March 3020, and thus, on September 21st, 3021 of the Third Age, Frodo set out to go, and 8 days later he joined Bilbo, Gandalf, and some elves, sailing west to the Undying Lands. Thus, he would be living out the dreams he had at Crickhollow and at Tom Bombadil's. Since Sam was also a ring bearer for the short time period, he left for the Undying Lands as well, and the Red Book to his daughter Eleanor after the passing of his wife Rosie years later, joining Frodo. And the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west, until at last on a night of rain, Frodo smelled a sweet fragrance on the air and heard the sound of singing that came over the water. And then it seemed to him that as in his dream in the house of Bombadil, the grey rain curtain turned all to silver glass and was rolled back, and he beheld white shores, and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise.